Oh, welcome to Roadmap to Revenue podcast. My first guest ever is Emily Mower, a colleague of mine. Welcome to the show, Emily.
Thanks, Greg. Thrilled to be here.
Yeah, it's really exciting that we get to kind of start talking about analytics, building up community of people who are like-minded, and I thought it'd just be great for people to let you know who you are, what you're doing here at the company, and then maybe even tell us a little bit like your history and how did you get to us, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. So, current day, the VP of Data Science, and it's a pretty fun role because I get to do two things. One is data science, which I've, very much
Built a life around.
for a long time, exactly. But the other is product design, which is super fun for me because I actually started college as an architecture major, and then I felt like, no offense to architects, that I was doing arts and crafts and that my parents were just paying too much money for me to be doing arts and crafts. So I felt like I couldn't major in that, but I still really enjoy design stuff. So it's been really fun to find a role that blends those, and at a company like Concentric, where I really like everyone genuinely that I work with, which is such a gift.
It's funny. I started down the architecture path too, but
Really?
I didn't. Yeah, I didn't drop out because I was arts and craft. I just couldn't do it. I just wasn't clever enough. So
That's fair.
yes, you've been with us. I guess it's almost over a year now, right? Almost
Yep.
going on year two. What were you doing before you got here? Kind of how did you've done a lot in econometrics and data analysis. Just give us a little background on your personal journey to the position that got you here.
Yeah, so shortly before joining Concentric, I wrapped up my PhD at Harvard's Kennedy School, where my research and my teaching focused on econometrics and machine learning. So I've always really liked math and trying to make math useful, and I took a statistics class prior to grad school when I was working for the economist Jeff Liebman, who's done a lot of really cool stuff, including really pioneering the earned income tax credit. And he called it baby statistics. So I took this baby statistics class, and I loved it. I was like, oh, yes, you can't know exactly what's going to happen, and you can have this range of uncertainty, but you can quantify how uncertain you are, which was just such a fun experience. And I really liked working for Jeff. And I started working for Jeff after doing a stint in consulting. And consulting was cool in that I got to think about a lot of different problems, think about how do I make things more efficient, build sweet Excel models and make them able to take in all kinds of different factors. I remember being up in Montreal and like dreaming about all of the different ways that things were going to go into my Excel model while I was working for a client up there. But just kind of burned out on the traveling, on the whole not sleeping thing.
The Monday to Thursday thing?
Yeah, Sunday to Thursday. It was a lot. So as I worked for Jeff, I really liked economics. I really liked the public policy impact that some of the research was having. Started down the academic route. Realized pretty soon into my PhD, especially after working on a paper where we were looking at senior citizens who were impoverished and trying to figure out what would be a targeted program that could bring the most people out of poverty after retirement, with the least amount of spend, but realized all of the political challenges between my nice model of how do I target those people in the most efficient way and how do you actually pass this through. And I got really discouraged between that and seeing some of the very non-collaborative parts of academia. I really like working on a team, feeling like I'm improving a product. I get to see the results quickly, get that kind of adrenaline rush from that, and keep going on that cycle. So I pivoted my research to much more applied, industry-focused research. Did some pricing algorithms, some inference stuff. Worked at Zillow, which had always been a dream. I love real estate. As I mentioned, I started college as an architecture major. Had a great time out there. Didn't want to move to Seattle, but loved the team. And then, as I wrapped up, I worked for a little while at edX doing some online education work. Ultimately wasn't a great fit for me and came to Concentric, and
You're still here?
Ever since. I'm
you're
still
here.
Which actually, if you look at my resume, speaks quite a bit.
Yeah. And what's amazing about your analytic prowess, you really haven't left all of the architecture because you've actually done a lot of software development and design, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. It's been really fun. In the last couple of months, we've done a lot of cool releases at Concentric where we've just heard what our users are saying. It's hard to open up a model and get to a well-calibrated model quickly. I don't know what a lot of these things mean. So, as a teacher, I think, how do I teach you what these things mean? And as a software designer, I think, how do I make you not have to engage with things that you don't know what they mean? So it's been a lot of fun, lots of fun mock-ups, and luckily we have a talented team. Viara in particular is pulling together a lot of really cool, beautiful designs. So it's been fun.
Yeah, no, I feel like you bring kindness to the software. So we've been, when we've been setting up the shows and the interviews, we're really trying to make them kind of consistent topics, not consistent questions, just so that people looking into the podcasts and maybe joining the community kind of get a sense of, the broad range of experiences people have with analytics. We're kind of following Gartner's ascendancy model because it makes a lot of intuitive sense to us. And so maybe you could talk about, what you've seen in what we call the descriptive world. What has happened, looking back and just kind of a historical model. Anything that's in your mind that, you used or you liked about that part of the analytics ecosystem, and just give us a sensibility of where you kind of started with that and what you're using today to describe the past.
Like just generally, or specifically
just generally.
for Concentric?
No, just generally. It's not really about Concentric. It's just about you as an individual facing the leadership challenges of going through analytics, right? I mean, you talked about looking at economic policy and seeing the roadblocks and that you moved away from it. So I think what we're trying to get here is just what have you used in analytics descriptively? Is it the same ideas you had 20 years ago? Are you old enough to be 20 years ago? Let's say 15 years ago. And then, are you using the same things today?
Right, yeah. So starting out, most of my consulting work was looking at historical data. And at the time, I didn't really have the framework to understand how does the descriptive differ from the diagnostic, differ from the predictive, differ from the prescriptive. So implicitly, I was looking at historical data, making predictions, but without really fully understanding how, all of the assumptions baked into that. And there I was just using Excel. So, Excel, you can do a lot in Excel.
You can do a lot.
But I have banned my team from using Excel.
So that's a great insight, right? You started with Excel. I did too. I thought the coolest thing that ever happened in Excel was Visual Basic. I was like, oh my God, you can do little slider bars. I'm so excited of having a nerd prom here. But you don't use it now. What's the team using?
I don't. Yeah, the team is in R now, and that really came from, they had done a lot of analysis, a lot of cleaning data, a lot of building charts in Excel. And at the time, the thought was, okay, you don't need to learn any languages to be able to do Excel, so it's going to be easier to pass it off. But I just saw them do the same thing over and over and over, and I was like, oh, this is such an inefficient use of their time. And so we've automated everything just about through R. You export from Concentric. And
so that's why that team is smiling a lot more, and we're getting people who want to join the team faster.
That's right. Yeah, I'm very excited that our...
So what's your sensibility about this notion of diagnostic, right? Because our journey that everyone asking people to talk about is, you describe the past, then you have to understand kind of why did it happen? What's been your journey around that topic?
Yeah, so one of the best projects I worked on when I was a research assistant for Jeff Liebman at the Kennedy School was looking at disability insurance and looking at the rise in disability insurance and why that happened, right? And so we know that there are baby boomers, and so they started, older people started to reflect a larger portion of the population. Older people are more likely to have back issues. So how much of the rise in disability insurance was simply due to the population dynamics? How much was due to changing in the rules? How much was due to kind of perceived laxness? There was a lot of different things that we put in that decomposition. It was a number of years ago, so I don't at this point in time remember exactly the specifics, but I remember what we did is we said, let's rerun history if the population distribution hadn't changed in age, and what would it have looked like? Let's rerun
So kind of
history.
like a counterfactual attribution.
Exactly, yeah. And so we got a lot of really great insights from that suggested that it wasn't that disability insurance had become super lax, but in fact that there were a lot of very intuitive reasons to explain the rise that was seen over the last 40 or so years.
Is that what you're doing today still, or for understanding the past, or is there like the Excel to R jump in the kind of just diagnostic world?
Yeah. So tools wise, certainly, I don't even think I could use MATLAB anymore, which is what I did all of that in. But I think conceptually a lot of it is the same, right? Is that in order to understand why something happened, you have to have some sort of causal framework. And so I spent a lot of my graduate school work looking at causality and econometrics, and then I would say today, Concentric has a simulation-based software that bakes in a lot of assumptions about how the world works, and if you change one thing, how would history have changed? So I think from the diagnostic perspective, it's probably pretty similar. I think I have more models available to me to be able to answer those questions, but
right, more choices.
Framework. Framework, it's the same.
Yeah, when you were talking about insurance, I thought, I better set up straight.
I saw you.
I was like, God, how Pavlovian can I be?
I'm at my standing desk, so
yeah, I should have stood up for this. So people are journeying through. We have I know a lot of people in the industry who say, now that I understand what happened, I want to know what's going to happen. Right? It's like the fastest thing that moves in the universe is information. So if I know the past, the next thing is what's the future. And we have here kind of like what's your been experience on predictive, and kind of what did you do and what are you doing nowadays for it?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I've been doing predictive work since the beginning of my career, but without really that framework. And during grad school, I did a lot of work in machine learning and price optimization, and so there's a predictive piece there. And I think most recently with COVID, we saw a lot of the fragilities of the predictive methods. What happens when all of a sudden you have a regime change? And so that's something intuitive, like Concentric's simulation software, you're able to build in, supply chains got disrupted and distribution changed and people got scared and they stayed home or they didn't want to travel. It wasn't appealing anymore. And so that's been a new framework for me since joining the company. But it's a lot more robust when you do have these regime changes and uncertainty of how the world's going to evolve, because it's not even just that there was a regime change, right? There's a regime dramatic change and then a constant evolution. So things are constantly changing, right, as vaccines roll out and people become more comfortable socializing or traveling again.
Yeah, I was on a virtual conference yesterday, and they asked me, what has everyone learned during the pandemic? Is that a lot of the modeling didn't have resiliency in the face of more overt disruption. And now people are returning back to the new normal, like, well, everything's being disrupted the whole time, right? And so our predictions are harder to manage because none of us are so naive about disruption anymore. I used to say the future is here; it's just not evenly distributed. The pandemic distributed confidence and predictions universally very quickly.
Yeah, and certainly it's not the first time it happened, right? Like I did some work in grad school as well, looking at Nowcasting methods and kind of short-term forecasting. And I was interested in the housing market, but I went and looked at some other areas where we've seen huge regime changes, like 2008 financial crisis, and there I think we saw that sliding the window on your training period helps you a lot because you're able to still leverage some of those old models, and they're a little behind, but they're not as behind if you had said my training data is from 1980 to 2010, right? It's very hard to figure out what do I make of that. So it's not the first time, but it's a slap in the face reminder.
Is that what you call it? Nowcasting, just changing the time frame of the data set?
So Nowcasting is trying to essentially forecast something that's happening now, but that you can't observe the outcome. So in the housing market, if I agree to buy your house, we might agree today, but we might not close the transaction for another 2 months. It might not become public record for another couple of months after that. So if someone wanted to estimate what am I buying your house for today, they would use the method of nowcasting. But they've found, looking at flu, for example, and other disease tracking models in epidemiology, that if you slide the window as you do nowcasting, trying to incorporate internet data like Google Trends, right, seeing, oh, people are searching for fever, so maybe they have a fever, that people's usage can evolve over time. And so if you just pick a static model in the epidemiological context where you're trying to incorporate internet data, it does a lot worse than if you let it slide over time. And I found that the same was true in a lot of economic realms as well.
Oh, cool. So that really leads to that kind of adaptive, resilient idea for predictions. Definitely. And so I guess we as a company have drawn you into the prescriptive world. I don't think we're the first prescriptive tool you've ever seen, but we are really surprising people with that. Just talk a little bit about what prescriptive means to you or meant to you, and any other tools you use besides ours to just do some of those, deliver against that.
Certainly, yeah. So I have a background in price optimization. So again, going back to graduate school, I helped a startup do some price optimization. So that would be a prescriptive analysis, right? I'm telling you, here's how you should set your prices in order to maximize your revenue. When I worked at edX after school, I also helped them with a price algorithm that last I heard had increased revenue by 50%. So that seems a little too good to be true, but hey, I'd love to claim a 50% revenue increase.
Yeah, take a percentage of the increase next time.
That's right. I know. I should have changed my contract, but alas. So certainly there are other prescriptive tools out there. I think what sets Concentric apart is that you're simulating the whole market. And so where those price optimizations that I did really only answered how should I optimize my price given the data that's available to me, Concentric is looking at how do I optimize a lot of different things, right? How do I optimize my price? How do I optimize my price if my competitor does something? How do I optimize my marketing strategy? How do I optimize my product features if I'm looking at a redesign? And so it gives our users the ability to answer all of those questions in one place. Once you feel like you have an accurate simulation of your whole market, you can push and pull levers, throughout the market.
So one last final question. I've set this question up. I call it the surprise question. Okay. What would you have told yourself 10 years ago, that you want to know now? But since you're so new to Concentric, what would you have told yourself a year ago that that you'd like to know now based on what you're doing?
Yeah, I think 10 years ago and probably 4 years ago and maybe even less than that years ago, I had a lot of uncertainty about where was I going to go in my career, because there were things that I liked and there were things that I hated, and I didn't really know. I don't even think I knew what data science was probably until a couple of years ago. Right now I'm here as the VP of data science. So I think I would have loved to tell myself 10 years ago that I would be able to put all those things I liked together in one place and make a career out of it. I think 1 year ago, I had sort of figured that out, so that's probably not the piece of information. But
you're just pinching yourself then.
Right, yeah, exactly.
I did it. Yeah. Well, hey, that was great, Emily. That's just what we want to do, and we are going to share it. So I thank you for joining us.